I'm excited to bring back to the stage my colleague, Dr. Tiffany Vora, who gave us that fantastic synthetic biology presentation earlier. She will lead our innovation panel. Dr. Vora.
Hello again, everyone. I am absolutely delighted to be moderating this panel on how innovations for Mars can deliver value on Earth and vice versa. Rather than attempting to summarize all of the amazing accomplishments of the panelists, I'm going to invite them to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about yourself, your organization, and what your organization's North Star is. Hunter, why don't you kick us off?
Hi, I'm Hunter. I'm founder of Thrive on Mars. It's a gaming studio focused on building immersive experiences for multiplanetary life. And our North Star is really to inspire a generation to want to become multiplanetary. We believe that gaming is a really important piece of inspiring millions of people to want to one day go to Mars or the moon. And it's a really cool way to get people involved, get people learning about the technology and all those things.
Hi everybody, I'm Jenn Gustetic. I'm the Director for Early Stage Innovations and Partnerships in NASA's Space Technology Mission Directorate. And the Space Technology Mission Directorate is one of 5 mission directorates at NASA, and we're charged with advancing the tech base for civil space. So that's a big mandate, but you can imagine all of the different types of space technology that are necessary for future science and human exploration missions. We cultivate that from early stages to demonstration to commercialization and infusion for the agency as well as commercial partners.
Howdy folks, my name is Garuth Acharya. I'm at 8090 Industries. We're an industrial tech venture capital early stage fund. We focus on space, defense, advanced manufacturing, and decarbonization. Some of our investments that we made are Vora and some other advanced manufacturing companies, very exciting. My background was spent some time at SpaceX, so excited to see humankind become an interplanetary species, Blue Origin, and then DoD. So exciting times ahead.
Hello everyone, my name is Phnam Bagley. I am actually a citizen of the world right now. I live all over the world because I'm trying to connect what's happening in the world of space in the US and what's happening outside. I just came back from Nigeria, actually. I run a company called Nonfiction, and what we do is that we take science fiction and we make it real and commercially available. We work on everything from brain implants to wearables to being selected to outfit the life module for Sierra Space. So I'm also a space architect, so wonderful to be here among you.
Thank you all. I think you agree. We have a really amazing range of perspectives on the panel, which is exactly what we were going for. I want to kick us off by exploring the title of this panel. How do you view the potential of innovations for Mars to drive value on Earth? We can focus on Mars, we can zoom out a little bit to space in general, but if you can, think specifically about Mars. What forces drive this potential? I can call on you or someone can raise their hands. How would you like to do this?
I can go first.
Perfect, thank you, Jenn.
Yeah, you're welcome. So NASA technology and the inventions that happen as a result of investments that we make for space have a multitude of different impacts here on Earth. We have many, many examples over the years. Who in the audience has heard of the Spin-Offs publication or NASA Spin-Offs? It's pretty cool, the types of things that are derived from NASA-funded research, whether that's stuff that we invent at our own centers or whether that's inventions that come through the funding that we deploy through contracts or grants at universities. We see all sorts of examples of where investments that we're making for space exploration, whether that be for science purposes or human exploration purposes, are licensed and then spun off for products right here on Earth, ranging from things like tools to monitor wildfire spread. That's a very hot topic for good reason now.
As a citizen of the state of California, thank you.
And a number of other emergencies, like we have a very well-known technology that's been used during earthquakes to try to find folks that are buried, folks or other sources of light that are buried during earthquakes. That's deployed quite a bit. So we see a lot of emergency response technologies that are utilized, as well as health technologies, and kind of across the gambit, medical technologies, LASIK surgery, kind of across the gambit. And those aren't just for technologies that are for Mars, but kind of the broader investments that we make for space. So an investment in the space program is an investment in innovation here on Earth.
Wonderful. Phnam, how about you? What do you think?
So when we think about the connection between innovation in space and on Earth, I think we're all trying to do the same thing, which is do more and hurt less. Doing more for humans. When you send humans in these very dangerous missions, there are some implications on their, what's happening with their physical body, with their mental health, with access to food, access to variety, privacy, things like that. And if we know how to solve them for such an extreme environment, then we can actually serve many people who don't have access to things like this, right? For example, power in space is an ever, big problem all the time. But so many people on this planet don't have access to power. So how do we increase the efficiency of power access and for all these people? So that's one of those things. I work a lot in physical and mental health. So, how do we make sure that people are getting the resources necessary to live, work, and be effective during their missions? All of that, starting with food, we should look into what kind of nutrition, what kind of variety, what kind of inclusion of culture can we bring to that? And we have to think as well about sustainability. How do we create sustainable systems where we're not just taking or sending everything up to space and then utilizing it, or even thinking of all missions in advance? We also have to, as Tiffany was talking about earlier, build on site, ISRU, things like that. And so building all this ecosystem and making sure that it's not hurting, but that it's accelerating the progress of where we want to go in space.
Garuth, you want to jump in?
Absolutely, very exciting to see just how innovation impacts, in space, impacts humanity. We look at biopharma, how do we leverage microgravity to, optimize the crystalline structures for all of these therapeutics that are out there? How do we connect remote communities in, Washington State or in the Midwest that honestly don't have access to broadband in the 21st century, right? I mean, how going from that all the way down to Earth observation. There's so much innovation that has happened. Going back home, I think when I microwave a plate, a lot of that came from the technology on heat transfer that NASA was doing in the 60s and 70s, right? So, it definitely takes some time to do that tech transfer from, deep innovation to the household, but I think that gap is being shortened. When we look at the innovation to get to Mars and the moon before that, I think massive innovations in nuclear propulsion, right? Nuclear thermal rocket technology and all that kind of stuff is coming out. And I think one of the things that I'm excited to see is the government, as they always have, being a leader in setting a vision, and then industry coming up and saying, we have the technical solutions, or we'll ideate together. I think with the Artemis Accords, that NASA's a diplomatic agency, right? I mean, they bring in countries together to work on this innovation, and I think that's huge. I think it brings humanity closer when you have engineers from Europe, India, the developing world, but also US and Canada. I mean, it's very exciting to see what the future holds.
Be careful bringing up the Artemis Accords with this group. There was a little spiciness with a previous panel, so that was excellent. Hunter, opportunity to amplify, redirect?
Yeah, one specific example is the innovation challenge we just wrapped up with the students, and we presented the winner yesterday here. And that made me think of how it's really interesting to overlap both Mars and Earth and innovation that's happening, because what the students were tasked with was how to create Mars innovations that solve UN sustainability objectives. So they focused on power, they focused on food production and water production to solve some of those objectives. And we got some amazing ideas. We got some ideas around food production on Mars. The winning idea used aeroponics, which is a really unique way of growing food on Mars. And there were also really unique power systems using wind, using sustainable power sources, because Mars at the end of the day needs to be self-sustaining. It needs to be a place where, you can't send ships there overnight like Amazon. So there's a lot more thought going into self-sustainability, and all of those things can be extremely useful for Earth. And I'm sure that's a lot what NASA has brought to the table is also helping in that way, which is cool.
So that's a really nice transition for us to zoom out a step. So one of the things that I have to do as someone who works as a futurist sometimes is look for these weak signals that are a cue to me, this is something to pay attention to moving forward. So I would love to pick your brains on what is the signal that you notice that makes you think, hey, wait a second, this space-directed innovation also has potential for Earth-based R&D. And Hunter, I'm going to turn to you first, because you saw a bunch of these come across your desk, your virtual desk, during the Mars Innovation Challenge. What were you looking for?
So we were looking for how to, basically our first game is a real-time economic simulation game. And what's unique about it is we're using realistic technology in the game, and players are using that to produce resources. So the objective of the game naturally is how can you efficiently become self-sustaining. So we were looking for ideas that help within the infrastructure, and we gravitated more towards agricultural and food production because the current state of our simulation is a little bit short on food. And so we're actually looking for technologies that made it more efficient. And so what's unique about our game and what's very different than other Mars games is we're able to start looking at different inefficiencies within the infrastructure for power or food or water systems, or even the best ways to explore Mars and find the inefficiencies. And it's more looking at the actual economic inefficiencies that are happening rather than just the theoretical inefficiencies. So we have more of a data-driven approach there using the game. And so that's kind of how we made that determination.
When I first met Hunter on a call, I barely let him get a word out, because as soon as he said like 2 sentences about his game, I blurted out, oh my God, it's a decentralized, crowdsourced innovation simulation. And he was like, yeah, I know. And I was like, okay, I'm with you. Great, gold star, Tiffany. Let's stay with the innovators and entrepreneurs for a minute. Phnam, for you, what's the signal? Like, what gives you that spidey sense that something here has potential for translation, space, Earth?
Not really translation, but really connection is something I want to bring up. So growing crystal in space has been tested a few times, very, very effective, and is giving pretty promising results. So the panel that was here before us was about AI. AI is running into a problem where there's kind of like a plateauing of computation. That's due to the fact that the hardware that we're building is kind of like getting to its limits. And the reason for that is because the semiconductors that are used in making chips or whatever are manufactured on Earth. And there's a level of a limitation in size and purity that is responsible for all of that. So there are some tests done right now by Stanford University where they are growing crystals in space. Crystals like graphene aerogel, I think they're growing GaN and things like that. And basically, they are observing that there's a level of purity of the crystal that allows for high level computation. So maybe the slowing down of the curve of AI can pick up again thanks to this kind of innovation.
I'm not sure if CHIPS Act money actually went to some of this research, but I think it should be. I was talking to a couple people who were looking to start, phenomenal engineering backgrounds, looking to start in-space manufacturing for, semiconductors, all this kind of stuff. But I think it goes back to public-private partnerships and being able to say, like, here are priorities, strategic priorities that are facing the country 5, 10, 15, 20 years out, and being able to plan accordingly, right? I think the Chinese do a great job at it, but I think in the United States, that is somewhat of it's difficult because, sometimes it's mercurial as to what the priorities are, whether or not we're going to be on the moon by 2025, whatever that is. But I think that is something that as a VC, when I look at potential investments in companies that are saying, hey, we're going to go to the moon, we're going to, helium, helium production, hydrogen production, whatever it is, you see all of this XYZ stuff. We're going to leverage this lunar regolith and move from there. I think one is, yes, there's massive implications for humanity back on Earth, but I don't know many private companies that are going to sponsor that or fund that innovation in the near-term future. And that's where I think government comes in, and they are the first leaders in this. Like, they are the leaders in hypersonic technology that will eventually benefit commercial use cases. They are the leaders in, Starlink became relevant because of DoD, and we got reusability in terms of rockets that are functional because of the Crew resupply mission. That's what saved SpaceX, right? And so I think when you look at a lot of these different bold innovations that are coming out, I think that's where government comes in and steps up to say, like, hey, here's the vision. I think NASA does that pretty well in many different areas.
You've identified a really important point here. So let's just put a number on this. I'm going to ask you, Garuth, and then you, Jenn. What's your time to return horizon that you're looking at? What's your preference?
Yeah, I mean, so we're not SaaS investors, right? So I'm not looking at some app that's going to deliver your groceries 2 minutes faster than Instacart, right? Like, that's not my metric. Ideally within 7 to 10 year cycles, I need to pay out my LPs, right? So we need liquidity events where either a company goes on an IPO direct listing, or they get bought for a pretty large multiple to make our investments pay out. And I think this is where it gets a little dicey that says, like, hey, there's technology here that maybe in 7, 10 years will be great, but it takes quite a bit of time to commercialize. So unless you're a billionaire backing some of these things, or an incredibly high net worth family office that can weather the storm for 15, 20 years, the vast majority of the venture-based community just, it has to have maybe 5 to 7 year, time horizons where we can see major progress. And these things are difficult and it takes time, but that's how the venture community usually approaches this.
Sidebar, if you are a billionaire or a high-worth individual, please reach out. I would like to talk to you. So now, Jenn, what is your number for the time horizon that you're looking for a return on? What does return mean to you, and what are the signals that you use as you're looking at projects coming your way?
Well, we have 32 minutes left, and I could spend 32 minutes talking about this. I'm just kidding, I won't.
Talk faster.
But
Talk faster.
The question you asked, and then the insights each of the panelists offered, add such different textures to this question, because there are so many different levels at which you can have this conversation. You can talk about it from the strategic level, about where are we headed, what's the heading. You can talk about it from the tactical level of how do we make individual investment decisions, not just at the R&D stage of kind of where are we trying to reduce risk in technology, but also when we do try to venture into the questions of, all right, what are we going to patent? We patent because we want to make something broadly available. We don't patent every invention that we make at NASA. You can't. It'd be prohibitively expensive. You patent because you're patenting the things that you think could have the greatest potential spin-off applications or commercial applications or public value by patenting it. The decision process that you use to determine when you patent something that's been invested, that gets towards commercial products, right, is different than the decision process that we would use to say whether we wanted to invest in an early stage concept for a potential technology project, which is different than the investment decision framework that we use to determine whether or not we're going to invest in a technology, large dollar value technology demonstration. That might be more of just a kind of a few years out to demonstration. So I'm kind of a decision process nerd. That is why I'm in the job that I'm in, right? Because we run a lot of volume, right? There's 4,000 proposals that comes into my organization each year. And we have to manage a lot of volume of ideas, right? And how do we give all of them a fair shake, depending on what the purpose of the funding opportunity is. So we do not invest like VCs. We shouldn't invest like VCs because we're the government. We're all part of an ecosystem, right? You mentioned some of the things from your perspective that you see the government needing to fill, right? But we don't have the same timelines. It's not 5 to 7 years. It's not 7 to 10 years. I mean, we do need to be able to show relatively quicker wins so that our stakeholders on the Hill and OMB see value in investing in technology, right? And keep our stories refreshed about the type of impact that we're having. But I mean, we've got stories in NASA where it's 20, 30 years, right, before you saw that kind of fundamental research pay off. I mean, one example related to Mars is the original NIAC program, which is the NASA Innovative Advanced Concepts Program. Really, really cool science fiction to science fact ideas that we invest in there. A concept came in the late 90s for a helicopter on Mars, that those aerodynamics could actually work, right? Because it's such a thin atmosphere that the aerodynamics are completely different to make any sort of flying device work on Mars. And we were one of the first groups through that NIAC program then, now 25, 30 years ago, to look just at if the physics were possible, right? That idea, $100,000 investment in just looking at the physics, like whether or not it was possible, just in a conference exchange in a hallway, some of the folks thinking about Mars landers, future Mars landers, got wind of the fact that that was possible, right? And so the Science Mission Directorate started to build this concept of helicopters on Mars into future architectures. Lo and behold, one flew on Perseverance, and little ingenuity did a lot better than most ever expected that tech demo did. That was a tech demo that became a functional part of that mission, that enabled that mission to accomplish a lot more. And it started with the seed of an idea that the physics could work, right? But it took 25 years to get that thing on Mars, right? Like that 25 years, no investor is going to invest in that.
So, interesting follow-up to that. In my last life, before I was a VC, I was a guidance, navigation, control engineer, and we licensed part of our hazard detection system technology from JPL because these guys, fantastic rover. I mean, great technology. So, I mean, this is an example of where the government can come in. They're early adopters or early visionaries. They'll do stuff that someone would say is a little bit crazy initially, and then eventually the tech transfer happens so that commercial companies can go ahead and execute and focus on other areas of innovation that you don't need to reinvent the wheel for everything. So clear example of 25 years of research on making sure you don't land in a crater on Mars could be applicable to the moon and then so on forth. So
and you mentioned Vora, right? That's a great example of a company that's not a Mars company, but it's trying to create a kind of test bed for pharmaceutical development in space in low Earth orbit. A lot of the technologies that are part of their system, they didn't try to recreate them, they licensed them from NASA. So there's at least 2 licenses that they built into their overall kind of system approach to what they're trying to deliver. And we try to encourage companies to think about us that way, right? Like come to us for early stage funding to de-risk the tech, because oftentimes VCs aren't going to want to de-risk the tech. They're going to want to de-risk the business model, not de-risk the tech. Like we de-risk the tech.
100%. I don't want to take up too much space, but when I get so we do early stage, right? So my check sizes are a couple $100K to $5 million. So it's in the grand scheme of things, I'm not writing $100 million checks. What's interesting is that when I see the deck, specifically if it's a pre-seed or a seed stage company, it's like, all right, let me see the tech, let me see your IP. What are you licensing? What are you not? Show me your SBIRs, show me your contracts, your OTs. Who are you working with at DARPA, NASA, DIU, all these different entities. This is like, if you haven't done this as a pre-seed company or a seed company, you're not going to walk away with investment. But that's how early you start. The founders actually have to come from this industry to move forward. I can just speak to just my experiences. So,
well, founders take note. You just got a masterclass on what to do early rather than late. I think that's fantastic. I'm going to ask Phnam and Hunter to put on their innovation ideation goggles for a second. So how would we take a Mars helicopter and translate that to benefits on Earth? My brain immediately goes to high altitude vaccine delivery in remote locations, villages in the Himalayas, whatever like that. What else could you picture?
Well, my mind goes to how would you arrive at the right use cases? And what we're doing, which I think is kind of, I love it. I think it's really cool. But basically, we're shipping technology into our game almost weekly. And so we're taking a very decentralized approach, a crowdsourced approach to figuring out what technology is important. And then we are using decentralized technologies like cryptocurrencies, like NFTs, to align economic incentives with people actually creating ideas and releasing those into the world. So, with a helicopter, I think there would have to be a use case that you'd want to look at and what would actually translate to Earth and how would that make sense. we're mostly focused on Mars. So for us, we would basically be looking at where the inefficiencies in the game, what kind of technology could fill those needs, and then how can people actually be incentivized to provide ideas for that. So we have essentially a proposal system where people can submit ideas, and it's similar to a patent sort of criteria. And we did that sort of as very specifically because most people that are playing games, they're brilliant problem solvers. And if you just sort of guide them in more detailed criteria, you'd be so surprised with the incredible ideas that you get from that. And it's pretty much untapped. I think gamers, they're not given the credit they deserve for that brilliance. And they're given fantasy worlds. They're given worlds that don't really mean that much in the real world. But if we can overlap the real world problem set with virtual audiences more, and that's what we're really trying to pioneer, then we can actually get millions of people from all around the world to submit these ideas. And we have audiences that are very abroad. We have people that are from emerging countries playing the game, and they typically don't have that kind of voice in larger circles. So that decentralized element really does help open up the innovation.
So what Hunter just did there was very clever. He evaded the trap that I set. The trap that I set was a solution in search of a problem. That's backwards, right? He reminded us to focus on the problem and then look at the potential set of solutions to find the best one. Well done. Anything to add?
Yeah, sure. Very clever. Yeah, I mean, I can think of many ways we can translate that kind of innovation, the helicopter on Mars, to Earth. Like, as you said, the delivery of vaccines and medication in very remote places in the world. We can also think of maybe there's some activities that can happen higher in the atmosphere of Earth where there's not as much concentration of oxygen and nitrogen. One thing that kind of coming back to what Hunter was saying about opening the stage to players is maybe we can look at what children and young people, how they can take these concepts and then kind of like translate into things that they might need in the lives that they live right now. So I'm a board member at an organization called Cyart Exchange, and Jancy is here somewhere. She runs it. So what we do is that we put out some scenarios like this. What would happen if we had to build colonies or communities on Mars? Like, what would it look like? So really, it's about collaboration of different generations of people who have very different needs. It's also collaboration between different disciplines, right? We have the people who are more art inclined, some people who are more science inclined, some people who are more technology inclined, some people who are more business inclined. And really creating that common language between all of these people in order to come up with the ideas that actually make sense. In the end, we all want the same things. Regardless of where we're in the world, we want to be safe, we want to be heard, we want our families and our loved ones to have the same. We want, a future that is, sustainable and everything that we talk about all the time. But we need to give more agency to more people around the world to do something about it in their own communities.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, if you look at something as simple as Apple, how simple it is because they employ so many designers and artists there. I mean, yes, engineers are great, but their products are beautiful. You look at a Dragon capsule, right? When we're launching humans, it's just 2 panels in there, right? You just have two screens for the most part, and the chairs where the astronauts sit in, right? You can see the difference in like simplicity of new orbital space stations, right? Whether it's Orbital Reef or any of these other things that Sierra Space is making, umpteen number of organizations. I think as we move forward, the combination of just like not just engineers in the room, but having artists, designers. This is the future, to have humankind become an interplanetary species, do those 3+ month travels, because design is important, ergonomics is important. I sit in my chair for 5 hours and I have a backache. God forbid, a flight to the moon would be, or let alone Mars, would be a bit more hairy.
Yeah.
And simple does not mean easy.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, simplicity is also inclusive, right? When we are billions of people on this planet speaking different languages, interpreting culture differently, making decisions differently, it's very difficult to see ourselves as part of the future of space. So how can we open the door to more people, to more ideas, to more looking back in the past as well, right? Indigenous kind of like wisdom in medicine or ways of living can actually inform us on how to think about the future of living on Mars. So let's open that door.
Yeah, I'll just add that inclusive innovation aspect that you're hitting on is very, very important to us on the Space Technology Organization because we're the front end of the pipe for this innovation, right? You never know where the best ideas are going to come from, whether it's gamers or someone at a large industry, small businesses, university, individual makers in their garage, right? We try to have a set of tools or opportunities available to anybody. It doesn't matter who you are, right? To be able to participate in different parts of space exploration because it is a global endeavor. It's a human endeavor, right? And there aren't boundaries when it comes to it being a human endeavor. There shouldn't be, right? Barriers to entry for that. So we are actively trying to design our process, our ecosystem in a way that embraces that principle. I did just want to touch on your point real quickly about the problems, like focusing on the right problems. I would be remiss if I didn't mention to this group that right now is the first time the Space Technology Organization at NASA is actually, in some semblance of a way, crowdsourcing the problem set that is important for us to work on as a steward for the tech base for civil space. So we actually have released a set of 187, I believe is the precise number, problem statements that we've refined through our technical experts kind of monitoring of the state of the art, but also understanding what our customers, which we see as science missions, human exploration missions, as well as future commercial capability that's working in partnership with government, to identify a set of problem statement sets that we could focus our limited dollars on. And there's way more problem sets than we have money. And that's just the reality of being a technology development organization. You always, you always have more demand for problems than you have money. And so right now, spacetechpriorities.org, we are literally crowdsourcing input from industry, universities, small businesses, individual innovators, to help us understand which of those problem sets are important to those different stakeholder communities as we transparently share a prioritization of problem sets that our nation and the world wants us to work on, right? It's kind of like the decadal surveys that science does, but in a very different kind of way, totally different way. First time around doing it. But that closes on Monday. It's been open for about 30 days, I think. So if folks haven't heard about it, it's pretty quick turn to get your input, but it's an opportunity to actually be able to weigh in on the priorities, the problem set that space technology is going to invest in.
So Explore Mars friends, that means between yesterday and today, you've received not one, but two personal invitations from NASA.
Probably shared
this
that
is
too
good. It's good to be
yesterday.
reminding to step up and have your input be heard. Fantastic opportunity. Speaking of a chance to have your voice be heard, in a few minutes we are going to transition to Q&A, so get those questions ready and you can come down here up front to the microphone when we make that transition. So take the opportunity to do this. I'm now going to use my moderator privilege to move the conversation in a direction that I find interesting. And again, I'm going to try not to phrase this as a leading question. What do you think is the potential for Mars-based innovation to be helping with sustainability challenges specifically here on Earth? So would someone like to kick us off?
Yeah, we can start with the basics: power, water, air, right? All the Maslow's hierarchy of need, that bottom base. What do we send? What do we produce on site? What do we like a lot of the missions in space, you have to think about things in advance, years in advance when you think about Mars, right? And so, of course, there are certain things that we won't be able to think about. And people evolve over the two and a half, 3 years of the mission, right? who you were 3 years ago is very different from who you are today. And we can't expect this, anything different from the people going to Mars. So what are the tools we're going to put in place for them to get the things that they need at the quantity they need it, but also the change necessary for them to have fulfilling lives during these 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Another concrete example would be, in addition to power, ISRU, all of that, is habitats. So years ago, again, this gets at timelines, might have been a decade now, we ran a challenge called the Deep Space Habitation Challenge, the prize competition to engage the public. Architecture firms got engaged in that, as well as all sorts of different design build companies. And one of the winners of that competition, Icon, and it was for a Mars application, right? That competition was envisioning the ways that we would build Mars habitats in the future. One of the winners of that, Icon, actually is out of Austin, Texas, is now not only building kind of 3D printed low-cost housing here on Earth, actually right now, right, as a spin-off application, but they also were contracted by NASA to be involved in building the Chapea demonstration facility. They're involved in thinking about lunar habitation, kind of 3D printing and additive construction methodologies for the future, but habitation is kind of another area that already has had immediate, from a design competition and a demonstration competition, large Centennial Challenge, $2 million Centennial Challenge, having impact here on Earth.
Yeah, you all met Melody from Icon in the previous panel,
Great.
so brilliant. Anything else to add, Hunter?
Yeah, I mean, maybe a little bit of a different problem set or different way of thinking about sustainability, but economic sustainability, social sustainability, and almost like psychological sustainability is actually very important, I think, on Mars, and maybe not thought enough about. Economic specifically, we're not going to have cash on Mars. We're going to be in a digital economy. What's that economy going to look like? How are people going to transact? And then from a social perspective, are we going to have a singular government? Are we going to have sort of a democracy? What is the government structure, and how is that going to be navigated within the different cultures that are on Earth? And one of the best ways we can do this right now is through digital simulation. We can, one example is there's a game called EVE Online. It's been going on for 20 years, and it's basically a economic simulation with a lot of different political factions that have grouped up, and they're vying over limited resources in this massive space economy. And it's been studied on how people have bartered, interacted, basically, and also just how power is shifted around this game world over the course of this real-time simulation. So we actually took a lot of inspiration from EVE Online when designing our first game, and we're called Thrive on Mars because we really want to focus on the positive. And all the other Mars games are shooting aliens, like not dying. Even almost every single movie on Mars is about how to not die. And the psychological issue there is that you're planting in people's heads that Mars is, a very dangerous place that you don't want to go. And I think if we really want to make life multiplanetary, we need to make sure to reinforce the beautiful parts about it. And so we really focus a lot on design. We focus a lot on the experience, the cool things, jumping 3 times, higher. We have buggy races, things that are interesting that get people excited about going to a planet that's completely different.
Garuth, anything to add? Oh, I'm sorry, Phnam.
Sorry. Yeah, there's a big elephant in the room when it comes to sending humans to Mars is food. We still don't have reliable solutions for that. One of the most common food that you find, aboard the ISS or space missions is freeze-dried food. So freeze-dried food is basically you remove about 96% of the water of certain food, you package it up, and then you rehydrate it just before eating. That can give you a shelf life of about 2 years, which makes it too short to go to Mars, right? And so I'm talking to some companies, one of them being in Finland, they're called Frost Dry, and they found a way to remove 99% of the water in food, not only that, they're also able to keep the structure of the food. So when you rehydrate a raspberry or a steak or anything else, they actually look like fresh again. And what's great about that kind of technology is not only the fact that perhaps we can send that to Mars, but also that way of processing the food allows for it, in theory, to keep the food for up to 50 years. So if you think about the implications of that, that can mean end world hunger, right? So maybe that back and forth between using the extreme environment of Mars, of the moon, or anywhere else in space can actually accelerate the research and the development of solutions like this. And I feel like there's a solution for food, there's a solution for power, there's a solution for water, for clean air, for trash management. All those big problems that we have today that impact our climate can be accelerated because of Mars.
I don't think everyone mentioned everything already.
Mic drop, yeah, okay. If you have a question, please come forward. We would love to hear from you. Hello.
Hey, I'm Bob Moses. I retired from NASA 2 years ago because there's some NASA technologies that just weren't getting funded. Like you said, there's a politics as well as priorities. So I've been maturing them, and they're just like you say, there's semiconductors and power. Without those two, we're not doing humans on Mars. The 3D printers require lots of power. You need power for growing food. The freeze-dried is a great idea. So what I like to do is get some time with you, Jenn, and Garuth later today and talk about what I'm doing to mature those technologies, because they are vital. They give you solutions for portable power at levels that the fission reactors will never meet at all. The semiconductor patents at NASA, which I'm licensed, give you natural radiation resilience. And you're going to need that as well, because everything's going to go AI and digital for Mars. So anyway, if I can get some of your time later today, that'd be great.
Well, one thing I'd like to offer for all the innovators in the room, right, because I'm sure there's lots of folks that have good ideas that they want to contribute to Mars, right, because that's why you're here, that NASA has these things called, and you probably already know this, but NASA has these functions called principal technologists and system capability leads, and these are people who are charged with understanding the state of the art in particular areas of technology. Their names are all publicly available, as well as their emails. And so we've got folks that specialize in power, that's Jeremiah McNatt. We have folks that focus on comms and nav, Jason Mitchell. But they're, you search literally NASA principal technologists, and there's a list of the people whose responsibility it is to keep, to know what the state of the art is, and they're also familiar with the mechanisms that are available for funding opportunities, whether that be if you're a small business applying to SBIR, or the other thing that I'll say, if you're a small business, each of the centers at NASA, the NASA centers have these roles called center transition, or like SBIR leads, basically, if you go to the SBIR website. And those are folks that, say you're working on power, and Glenn is a big center that has power capability for NASA. If you reach out to the Glenn SBIR rep, that person will sit down with you one-on-one, talk with you about your technology, talk with you about the opportunities to propose at NASA, and give you information specific to the technology area that you're looking to navigate. And so I just say this because in my job, with all the proposals that come in, I can't navigate every possible idea that could come in, which is why we have an infrastructure to help people, right? To be there to help people get the information that they need to help navigate what can feel like a black box, right? The agency can feel that way. So we hope that we put some contact structures in place to help folks.
Jenn, I know those people very well. I worked with them, and I've talked to them as new people have transitioned in, and that system just quite isn't working yet.
Yeah,
So-
well, and we're always open to feedback about how to make that better too. So,
Great, thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. Hello. What's your question for our panel?
Okay, I'm sorry. I wanted to ask Hunter a question about his game with Thrive on Mars and what you have planned for said end game content for the game for players once they become very efficient in production of the various resources and things required to survive, where it's fully sustainable for different things like science development and political development and things like that.
Are you asking for spoilers?
Yeah.
Way to own that. I like that.
Well, thank you for your question. Yeah, I mean, some of that's under wraps, but some of it is also up for discussion. So one of the ways we're developing our games is with our community. So we have about 15,000 people in our Discord. We have a decentralized autonomous organization we're standing up this year. So if you want to help us shape the game, definitely join, and you can help decide where the game goes, because it's real time. So it's continuing to evolve over time, and we're going to be voting on things like where to explore next. We're on a very specific region in Mars. We're using the Mars Climate Database to bring in realistic weather patterns into the game, and so we need to figure out where to go next.
By the way, parents, if you really want to make your kids' heads explode, go home and tell them about your Discord account and how you're part of a DAO. That'll really take care of it.
Okay, thank you. And if you have time later, I'd like to talk more about the game. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. Hi, Lucas.
Hello. My question is also for Hunter. I heard you talking about economics on Mars, and I'm wondering if you think that there will be a different Martian currency, or they will carry over like the US dollar or the EU. I want to hear your opinion about that.
It's definitely a difficult one to know. I do think that it needs to be efficient, it needs to be decentralized, it needs to be transparent, and it also probably needs to be disconnected from the Earth, because it's an economy on its own. It's a self-sustaining economy, and it probably would make sense to start at least from scratch in a lot of ways. So I do believe it will be a cryptocurrency. I think that there will also be tokenization of resources and property on Mars, because that's basically the future of, I believe, the way that ownership is basically communicated and tokenized. So yeah, I think those are the principles that I think would make sense, but yeah, there's a lot between now and then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
So let's take us toward the end game of this panel here. Garuth, if I gave you a magic wand and you could fix anything about transitioning Mars-based innovation to benefit Earth, what would you change?
I think, two things. One is stability and government priorities, and the second is government contracting. I think those are the two biggest hurdles to innovation.
Those are two big magic wands you just asked for.
Yeah.
But,
So
okay.
I mean, I will say maybe procurement process. 'Cause
Three
I
big
think that's
magic
that's
wands.
very hairy. And I would say like two quick things on that. One is that SBIRs are great, but those are not programs of record, and rarely does that direct to phase 3 or whatever whatever you want to look at, OTs if you're DoD. Rarely do you see many of these large startups really executing and making that or traversing that valley of death. That's something that we see quite a bit of. And I think the second thing is very much stability and saying, here are priorities, here are the timelines. We are a democracy, and as a result, you need Congress to fund these programs, and whether they want to hold up generals or appointments, or want to push out different priorities, so you never know what will happen. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Phnam, how would you use your magic wand?
I would want every country in the world to have a say in how we do Mars. Culturally, technologically, every aspect of it. Like we in the West, or at JAXA, or all the big space agency, we have a big voice. Let's give a voice to everybody else as well, because they have some really, really cool things to share.
Awesome. Hunter, how would you use your magic wand?
I think that's a great reason. Yeah, like to give more people voices, and I don't really have too much to add onto that. I think that's a really important one.
Nice. Jenn?
I would triple click on that, but also add that if I could bestow a mindset shift also on how people see investment in space broadly, that it's not a trade-off between investing in space and investing here on Earth, that there are benefits of investing in space for Earth. So a mind shift wand.
Yeah, I think that's what I would use mine too as well. You know, from a selfish perspective, I get asked all the time, why should we spend money on space when we have so many problems on Earth? And to me, that's a false choice. And I would love to share that messaging with everyone else. Okay, I think we have had a great conversation here today. Would you please join me in thanking our panelists?